Hi everyone, it's Crypto Granny here, Susie. The date's the 15th of December 2022 and it's about 4:30 p.m. in Europe. Now, I've got a lot to talk about, people, so I'm going to have to cut up these podcasts because there's been rate rises, there's been all sorts of things, plus the FTX thing, but also the crypto news and just so much going on. Interest rate rises from a lot of countries, but we'll talk about that in another podcast. But what I want to talk to you guys about today is obviously Sam Bankman-Fried and also FTX, but also I watched Capitol Hill on the 13th to 12th, which is Tuesday in America, and it was on Capitol Hill, the Houses of Reps, which they call gentlemen, and there was obviously an inquiry into SBF. And I've got to be honest with you guys and girls, what came out of that was damning, absolutely damning. This guy, I wouldn't want to be Sam Bankman-Fried for anything in the world, seriously. Just on, but when he's been arrested by the U.S. Attorney Office, Southern District of New York, and they formally charged him on the 13th of the 12th with 8 charges of conspiracy and fraud. And just on those 8 charges alone, just from one department regulatory board or committee in the US, just on those regulations from the USA Attorney Office, Southern District of New York, just on those 8 charges alone, SBF could potentially get 115 years in jail. The guy's just turned 30. I mean, this would be seriously terrible. I mean, I've got to say, first up, guys, it's horrible what he did. There's no doubt about that. Millions of people lost money. If we compare it to the Bernie Madoff thing in 2008, the pyramid scheme where he lost a lot of people's money through the share market, the stock market, that only Bernie affected 37,000 people, right, as clients that lost their money. But the problem is SBF, and I'll call Sam Bankman-Fried SBF from here on in, has lost millions of money, billions actually, not millions, 10 billion and $10 billion of funds. And it's like about millions and millions of people, right? Millions, apparently 2.7 million people in America, another, 5 million overseas. Also, they still can't find money. And they had the guy that's the CEO now of FTX, who's, John, what's his name? John Ray III, who also worked as a litigation consultant specialist for Enron, which was one of the biggest corporate collapses. I think it was in the 80s or the 90s, I can't remember now. But they're an engineering company and it was just an absolute huge collapse. But this is bigger than that. This is the biggest corporate collapse in the US that's ever happened on this such major scale. Now, at Capitol Hill, obviously it's the US, it was very much focused on US clients, not so much on foreign non-US people that have FTX clients. So it looks like potentially the US clients could get their money back, the 2.7 million people. But, for all of us other people that, may have had FTX in an Australian account or whatever, we may not get back our money. But either way, this young man, unfortunately, SBF is looking at if he's charged and, basically they find that he is, it was fraud and, conspiracy and all this sort of thing, then potentially this young man could go to jail for 115 years, which is scary because he does suffer with a lot of depression. He takes pills and all this sort of thing. And, he sounds like he might have been a drug user as well. I really got to tell you, I think they need to put this young man on suicide watch, seriously, because I don't think this guy's going to make it, seriously. He got arrested in Bahamas, as you know. We saw it on the TV, the handcuffs and everything, and now he's in the Bahamas in some jail, which apparently, if you believe the stories or not, potentially, could be rat infested and God knows. So it looks like the US are going to extradite SBF back to the US from the Bahamas, but that hasn't come out yet. But anyway, I want to go over this Capitol Hill thing because it was quite interesting. It was a House of Reps, all different people. They called them gentlemen or madam or whatever. And they came up, they basically said, was it conscious stupidity on behalf of SBF? The millions of accounts and millions of users, have been, they've lost their money. FTX, the exchange, didn't do any know your client rules, didn't know the clients, didn't do any anti-money laundering. They didn't get people to fill out stuff, so they're in breach of all sorts of regulations and rules. What they did in FTX, honestly, this guy could go to jail for 1,000 years. Wait until the SEC gets involved in everything else. I mean, the SEC and Commission for Futures Commission have also sued Mr. Bankman-Fried for fraud. And, it's with the SDNY indictment, the SEC lawsuit, and now we've got the Commission of Futures also going to sue this guy as well, right? So he's going to be, if he gets 115 years just from one regulatory environmental commission or whatever, crikey, I mean, there's another 100 years added on for each regulator, which is going to be pretty bad, okay? John R. Ray III, who again was is a specialist in fraud accounting and all this sort of thing. He basically spoke to Capitol Hill, and he said he's never seen anything worse in terms of corporate regulation and non-compliance and non-accounting and everything else, right? He said it's a bigger failure than Enron. It's the biggest failure in the US, right? They're also talking about his IRS filing, like tax filing. They're trying to get him on a tax evasion thing as well. Honestly, everything you could imagine this guy's done, he's done everything wrong, and they're just going to throw the book at him, I think. So now they're trying to get him on potential tax fraud for not filing tax returns. How many houses did he have? Who did he buy the houses for? How much money did he send the Democrats? Apparently some of the money was sent not in his name but by other people, and they think that he may have sent about $73 million, for political donations, right? There's just so much going on here, people. I have to just do this separately to everything else today because, honestly, there's just a heap of stuff going on. So this guy, really, they're trying to get him on tax evasion. And if you remember rightly, go back to the 1930s, there was a gangster in the US called Al Capone. This guy had murdered people, a big gangster, right, bootlegging gangster. But they got Al Capone on tax fraud laws, right? And that's how they got Al Capone. Even though he killed, hundreds of people and he was, a terrible type in that sense, a criminal, they got him on tax fraud, and that's where he died in jail on tax fraud. So, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad what this guy's done. And not only that, the court said, Capitol Hill, that he'd been quite insulting, and they couldn't read out the words. Mr. John Ray III basically said there was a lack of insurance for Alameda as well as FTX. There was no internal controls. There was no real-time like Nexo. There was no accounting done. There was no proper list of corporate structures. Bank accounts were all over the place. There was third-party transactions, which again is illegal. Everything they've done that they could do, they've done, right? Everything in terms of banking, right? Not looking where the source of the money is for any money laundering. That's the Patriots Act. You go to jail for a long time if you accept the receipts from terrorists and this sort of thing. And that's why under the US regulation, you've got to know your clients, right? Particularly if they're retail clients. And then this whole thing between Alameda and FTX, where FTX was allowed to transfer $10 billion straight through to Alameda, who was basically trying to buy FTT, right? So, some of the bank accounts are in the US, some are offshore, some don't have separate bank accounts. There's no limits. They found out that Alameda Research had no limits to trade with. Even when they were on margin, limit to top up their account, they had no limits in place they could just trade what they liked for as much as they liked. And clearly they traded $10 billion away and lost it, right? No credit limits, no settlement limits, no counterparty limits, no nothing, okay? Absolutely nothing, right? When John Ray is involved in this organisation, they're still trying to find the assets. They don't know where all the ledgers are. They certainly don't know whether, crypto assets are sitting in hot wallets or cold wallets or what. They're still trying to, find out what happened, because nothing was done properly. The accounting and the internal systems weren't working, and there was no real-time systems and no experience by the people in that business. And that's what I need to really focus on next time. And that's where I got it wrong with Bankman. I assumed because he was so well connected he knew something, but clearly he didn't, okay? And that was a big mistake on my behalf, which I'm certainly rectifying. Now, also, they think, this guy, Mr. Leutmeyer, who was also another member of the House of Republic, was questioning about money laundering. Now, you could money launder anything if you don't have a proper accounting system. FTX didn't have a proper accounting system, right? They didn't have a proper accounting system. They had no compliance. There was no limits on what could be, sent to third parties or offshore or whatever. They did what they liked. It was like the crazy West. There was no consumer protection at all for consumers, right? Again, another fellow said, Mr. Paul Mutter, what SBF has done could take 100 years to unravel or to untangle. And they were talking about Bernie Madoff. I mean, Bernie Madoff was arrested in 2008. And it took, now it's 2022, and some funds had just been released from Bernie Madoff, the Ponzi schemes, and that took 14 years from 2008 until today, right, 2022. The FTX thing is so much worse that Mr. Paul Mutter, rightly so, said this thing is going to take 100 years to unravel. When, we were only talking about, Madoff having 37,000 clients, and it took 14 years for distribution to the clients, where, FTX has millions and millions and millions of clients, right? About 7 million clients and about 1 million creditors who they owe money to. So it's probably all up about 8 million people, right, that have been affected. It's massive or more. This will take years, and, honestly, it's just a shocker, an absolute shocker. Terrible, really. And, this guy will probably get indicted and he'll probably be moved back to the US, I should imagine. But John Ray III said he wouldn't trust one piece of paper that came out of FTX, not one. He said he has never seen worse compliance, no accounting, no real-time anything. FTX had invested in investments, other businesses, 500 other different businesses, and there was no paperwork or anything, no valuations. They paid over the top for some businesses in terms of valuations. Just a shocker, he said. The company had to be completely restructured. There was no audit committee, no independent directors. There was co-mingling, the focus of co-mingling, where there was no Chinese walls at all at the front desk for FTX or Alameda Research, so they'd actively trade against clients. Generally, within a bank, you will have Chinese walls. I mean, literally walls between the risk management section, the compliance section, the trading section, the funding section, all that sort of thing. In FTX, it sounds like everyone's order book was everyone's order book, right? Money went out willy-nilly. Sam Bankman-Fried himself borrowed $1 billion from FTX to buy his parents some beautiful houses in the Bahamas, 19 million or 20 million or so. But the operations were just a shocker. The records are terrible. Like Mr. Ray said, the new CEO of FTX, to restructure the whole business, he would not believe any paperwork that came out there out of FTX or any audited accounts. He said, we have to reconstruct everything, because he said, I don't even believe the audited accounts. So that means even the auditors are on the hook for FTX, okay? Now, it sounds like Alameda Research wasn't audited, but certainly FTX was, the exchange, right? So, and then also, Gary Gensler gets involved, right? And we know who he is, right? He's sitting on the SEC for crypto, right? And the thing is, he had meetings with SBF many, many times, and meeting even with his father, right? And this is the thing. SBF had a lot of money and paid Democrats and everything else in the government. And so, of course, Gensler thought he was a good bloke and made things easy for him, right? But the thing is, right, they all believe that this guy was not a fraud, right? and he got certain concessions. It's a shocker. Gets even worse than this. This guy's going to go to jail for 1,000 years, right? Another lady that was on the committee, and I thought this was very interesting because they all looked at different things. So we're looking at tax evasion and all sorts of things. Mrs. Beattie, chair of diversity and subcommittee of social committee from Ohio, and so she's chair of diversity subcommittee and inclusion. And she said, she's just so disappointed in this because in her community where she's like a senator or something, a rep or something of the community, she knows a lot of people that are invested in FTT and had money sitting on FTX, the exchange, right? And that money's still frozen. And she asked the question, how many users lost their money and how many will get their money back, right? So Mr. Ray, the CEO of FTX, said, look, we are trying to find as much money as we can. We're trying to secure bank accounts. We're looking for crypto wallets. This is a litigation time frame. It's going to take longer than 1 month. It's probably going to take at least 8 to 10 months. And don't forget, Mr. John Ray's on like 2,000 US an hour. So this guy's on a lot of money. But he said this is just so complex and you cannot rely on any paperwork within FTX, right? None. To answer the question, how many people involved, to Mrs. Betty, Mr. Ray, from the CEO now of FTX, said, they think there's about 2 to 7 million users in the US, 2 to 7 million users. He said the problem was there's multiple trading accounts for one user, and that makes it very difficult, or they might have their own company trading, So the fact that he's saying there's 2 to 7 million potential users in the US is huge. And it looks like globally, he had another, 2 to 3 million users in FTX and buying FTT, right? So, he said there was just, the 10 billion literally got transferred from FTX to Alameda Research with no compliance, nothing, Mr. Ray said it's the worst corporate situation I've ever seen where there's just no accounting controls, no compliance, nothing. People could spend clients' money, $10 billion, willily at their will. No problem at all. There was no transparency and controls, nothing. Then Mr. Barr from Kentucky came and was talking about the corporate governments, and Mr. Ray said, look, there was no independent boards, no internal controls, no accounting, no independent directors, no employees with the right experience. No one had experience. They were all just, maths head, trading heads that had no experience. And that's true too, because when you look at SBF's background, the guy apparently went to MIT, which is one of the best schools in America. Apparently he was mathematically talented. He excuse me, he studied physics as a major and then he did mathematics as a minor, right, at MIT, which is one of the best universities in America. Both his parents were at Stanford, and then he worked for Jane Street, which is an arbitrage trading house, Jane Street, right? Now, to get in there, you have to be under 30. You've got to be able to code. You've got to be a mathematician wizard and a physics wizard like this guy. But the reality is he would have had limits with Jane Street. He would have had credit limits. He would have had trading limits. He would have had settlement limits. He would have had counterparty limits. He would have had all these sort of limits in Jane Street. So what happened after Jane Street, SBF, where, it was a complete, huge corporate failure on every account of fraud and conspiracy. You can't say you were conscious and, you were just not conscious of the whole situation and you didn't know what you're doing because you'd worked for Jane Street, and so had Caroline Ellison from Alameda Research. Now, Jane Street would have such big limits, to stop traders, severe limits, I should say, to stop traders from over-trading and losing a lot of money, right? This is very important. And in my day, if you broke your limits, you could only do it once. And if you did it again, you'd be out on your ass. You lose your job straight away and you wouldn't get another job because people would know you break your limits and you lose money. You just would not get a job, right? So, there was no red flags in the system of their two businesses, Amelda and FTX. None, right? And, no, and even in the case of no separate bank accounts, which is just unbelievable in this day and age. Seriously, when the regulatory environment is so compliant and you've got to literally, do all the regulatory accounting stuff. Now, like Brian Armstrong Coinbase said, he spends literally 2 days a week on regulation and compliance for the SEC and everyone, right? Apparently last year there was 66,000 requests from the regulators for information and data from Coinbase. And even Bernard's from Changpeng Zhao, Bernard's, he's spending 2 days a week on compliance, and he's now hired another 500 regulatory and compliance people that know all the compliant laws and everything else in the US particularly, which is so onerous for, anti-money laundering, know your client, all sorts of things. Compliance, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, everything, right? And the cost of compliance is huge, absolutely huge. So, this is not going to end very well for this young man, I'm afraid. It's really, really bad because they can get this. This guy's done everything, right? Everything you could do wrong, this guy has done, right? He's borrowed money from the business. He's bought his parents' houses. He's used FTX and its client money like a piggy bank, okay? Absolutely like a piggy bank. And honestly, this guy, my God, I mean, you go to jail for a seriously, seriously long time, more than a lifetime, let's put it that way. And I wouldn't want to put that on anyone. It's just really, really sad when you read about this stuff, seriously, because, again, we're talking about a young person that's going to end up in jail for a long, long time. I mean, when you've got a well-known security fraud operations director like John R. Ray III, who had an Enron experience, saying he couldn't even trust a report that came out of FTX or an audit report or anything, or he wouldn't even trust, the paper that he read from FTX. Everything has to be reaccounted for and done, way back. So it's going to take a long time, but I'm afraid, in all honesty, Sam Bankman-Fried, it's almost like it's been, a forced suicide, of his business. He did everything he shouldn't do, and, there's just no way of getting out of that, I'm afraid, unfortunately. And, watch this space. This guy's going to go to, Bernie Madoff, but 37,000 people he affected. Sam Bankman-Fried and his business has affected something like, 10 million people, clients and creditors. Unfortunately, this guy will go to jail for a long time, and unfortunately, his parents are going to be sent broke with all the lawyer fees and everything else. But it's not a great story at all, I have to tell you that. Anyway, yes, Binance may have been a contributor because, CZ, Changpeng Zhao, was very, naive. Naive was the right word as a trader. He was not a trader. And every trader knows in the market, you never tell people what you're going to do. You don't tell people you're going to buy something or sell something, because if you tell people, the whole world knows what you're going to do and the whole world front runs you, starts doing it before you do. So as we know, what got to this was FTX, made donations. CZ didn't like it. That was also mentioned. And FTX was saying something else against decentralization, which CZ didn't like. Then there was that Cointelegraph article about Amelda and the structure between, FTX and Amelda. And that was around probably the 2nd of November. Then we had this thing from CZ about the 6th or the 7th. And, he told people he was going to sell FTT, the token of FTX. Well, FTT was about $22-23. And within about 12 hours, it went down to about $1.20. And that was front running. He told the whole market, I'm going to sell FTT. Right? So, of course, the whole market sells FTT. And that's effectively what caused this whole problem with FTX having no liquidity because most of their assets, the exchange's assets were sitting in FTT, but the client's assets, which are a liability to FTX owes the client's money, were sitting in things like Bitcoin and other coins that weren't moving down as quick as FTT. So Bitcoin might have been just staying at 17,000 or whatever, but FTT went down from $22 down to 1 or something. So their assets, the problem is the FTX exchange's assets, which were mainly FTT, were heading down towards zero, but they still have on the other side $10 billion of liabilities of clients' money, right? And that's why Sam Bankman-Fried blames everyone else and blames CZ. But the point is, this would never have happened if they'd been properly capitalised, FTX, with proper accounting, compliance, regulatory controls in place, with people that knew what they were doing, business experience. These people were too young and stupid. And also, they were cooking the books, if you want to call it that, using FTX's liabilities they owe the clients as a piggy bank, right? And it's a no-no in business. You just don't do that, right? Ever. But Sam Bankman-Fried likes to blame CZ for that. It was going to happen no matter what, eventually, clearly. And he tends to blame everyone else but himself, right? I.e. for saying, Caroline Ellison, the CEO of Alameda, and she's about 28 and she looks about 12 years of age, fair income. He's trying to blame it on her because she's, the CEO of Alameda Research, right? But, and we also see that Caroline Ellison's got herself a big polluting lawyer who used to work for the SEC. So watch this space. But I've got to tell you something. I wouldn't want to be these people for anything. They will go to jail for a long time. And in America, unfortunately, you get more jail time for, they call this white-collar crime, not intending to be, racist or anything. They just call it that, white-collar crime. But if you killed someone, you would have only got probably 12 to 15 years. But under securities law and all this compliance reg and everything, this fellow, just on one department, of justice, just one regulatory department in the US, on 8 accounts, he could get 115 years, which, wow, I wouldn't want to be that guy. Anyway, guys and girls, we're doing a lot for this not to happen, certainly. Age would have to come into it and more experience because he certainly conned everyone, including myself and, Temasek, the Singapore entity that put in, 200 million or something, and they did 8 months of due diligence on FTX, 8 months, and they still didn't pick it up. So he conned a lot of people. Anyway, guys and girls, I'm going to do a couple other podcasts. I'm really busy, but I hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.